Hello, I'm Jen Rowry. I am the Associate Director of Engagement for Healthy Birthday, Inc., the nonprofit that started the Count the Kicks campaign to prevent stillbirth. And I am so excited to be here today with two wonderful Alabama moms, Amy Ray, our Alabama Count the Kicks ambassador, and her friend and neighbor and Save Mom, Shelley Patterson, and little Thatcher, who is in our arms today. And we're just super excited to have both these women here to share their stories and educate all expectant moms on the importance of tracking movement. Amy, I'd love to start with you. I'm just gonna ask you today to share with us what your role is as a Count the Kicks ambassador and what led to this passion to volunteer for our organization.
My role is to teach expecting moms to count their kicks and understand that the movement is important at the end of the pregnancy. I'm passionate about this because my husband and I, 9 years ago, lost our son Rowan to stillbirth. And I really would not want anyone to ever go through the loss of a child.
Well, we are so thankful that you share your story, and Rowan is such a special hero in this story. We are just grateful to be able to share his legacy today. And we thank you for all the babies that you're saving by sharing Rowan with us. I would love for you to tell our audience how you know Shelley.
I met Shelley because she's my neighbor in my subdivision. She's an amazing friend, person. When I was pregnant with my son, after the loss of him, she introduced me to her sister, which helped me grow and helped me get through the loss of my son, her having been there before. And she also didn't tell me that she was pregnant with her first one. And she's just an amazing person. She's a wonderful mother, all the way around. I just love her to death.
Well, and I'm sure she is very grateful to have you in her life too, because not only does she have a great friend and neighbor, but a bit of a hero in you and Rowan. So Shelley, with that, thank you for bringing Thatcher into the video. He makes everything all the better, and he's the reason that we're doing the work that we're doing here with Count the Kicks. He's a save baby, and Shelley is a hero because she was paying attention to movement and spoke up, and Thatcher was in trouble. And so she was able to save Thatcher, and Amy's influence and story is part of that. So I would love for you, Shelley, to just tell us about the last days of your pregnancy and the delivery and how Amy in particular impacted that story.
Yes. So this is actually my second child. I had a child, as Amy mentioned, a little boy who is 8. I was pregnant right after Amy lost Rowan. And that pregnancy went off without a hitch. There was nothing. It was a very normal pregnancy. This time, when we wanted to go have a second child, we dealt with secondary infertility, and we tried for a very long time, for 4 years, to try to conceive and did all the medical things. None of them worked. And we finally gave up, and we had a miracle conception. And with this pregnancy, though, things were just a little bit different. I had some health issues. I had some blood clotting issues, and I actually was diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And things were just a little bit different this time. I was a little bit more anxious. I always knew that stillbirth was on my radar because there's 2 babies in my personal life that passed away, one being Drake, which was my aunt's baby, who was born right before I was born. So when I was a little girl, I would always say, I have a baby cousin in heaven. And I would often, I was inquisitive about that. And then my sister, 13 years ago, her little girl, Brinley, she was born still after a complication with her cord. And her baby also went into stress, and we lost her. And that was just kind of a major life-changing event. And so when Amy and I, we became mutual friends because at the time, a bunch of ladies in our neighborhood, like we would go out to lunch and things like that. And I remember actually exactly where I was. I was teaching a summer camp when my friend called me and said that Amy had lost Rowan. I immediately knew that God had not put me in Amy's life haphazardly, that this was something that I was supposed to, that I could help her in the way of not my experience, but putting her in contact with my sister, who has just kind of been a champion in my personal life, in just terms of like being just a rock for people who have dealt with infertility and stillbirth. So Amy and I, we just instantaneously became friends. So with Hudson, Amy was not a Count the Kicks ambassador yet. So even with Hudson, even though I knew about stillbirth, I did not know about Counting the Kicks. But I started seeing that Amy, she really poured herself into this campaign, and she'd post about it on social media, and we had conversations about it, and she just would beam about how this was something that she just felt was her mission in life, and that it was her tribute to Rowan. And so when I did have this miracle conception, I knew immediately that this app, Count the Kicks, was something that I was going to incorporate into my pregnancy journey. And so at 27 weeks, I downloaded the app, and I read all the stories of all the other baby safe stories, and I began counting his kicks, and things went off. They were fine. I mean, every night I would count his kicks, and some days they'd be a little bit longer, and some days it'd be a little bit shorter time, but it was within approximately 20 to 45 minutes, the same within that range. I would feel 10 kicks. And the Saturday before Easter Sunday, I was actually scheduled because I had gestational diabetes, and because I'm 37, which they consider me a geriatric pregnancy, and just because of some of my health issues, my doctor did a really good job of making sure that he was on top of the health of my baby. And so I had extra ultrasounds along the way, and I had non-stress tests every week from week 36 until I had him. And so actually on the Thursday before I had him, the Thursday before Easter Sunday, I had a non-stress test. Everything was perfect. My doctor jokingly, I was scheduled for an induction, a scheduled cesarean on Monday. And he was like, don't go into labor over the weekend. And I was like, don't worry, I feel great. Because I felt great. I was walking every day. Things were perfect. I was just waiting the arrival of my baby. And on Saturday morning, I woke up to just some contractions and things like that. I didn't go into labor with Hudson. So I had a good friend who's a labor and delivery nurse, Jana Womack. And she kind of walked me through like what to expect and when to go in. And I called the hospital several times just saying, should I come in or not? I will tell you, COVID played a huge role in that, because my mother-in-law, I have another son, and we had to have care for him. And so they quarantined for 14 days in order to keep our son. And there was a big storm coming. We were going to have bad weather on Easter Sunday. And so I said, will you guys come get him? I'm kind of having contractions. I'm nervous that I'm going to go into labor. And I'm going into labor. And she said, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, I don't want to go to the hospital and be exposed to all the germs when I don't know if I don't know if it's time. I called the doctor that night that was on call, asked him if I take blood thinners. Should I take my blood thinners? He said, you know what, just take some Unisom, and if it's real labor, it'll keep progressing. If not, that will help you get some rest, and hopefully you'll rest over the night. So I actually did not rest very well over the night, but by the morning time, the contractions had stopped. So this is the morning of Easter Sunday. They had stopped, and so I was exhausted, and I told my husband, I'm going to get some sleep. So I did, and I woke up about noon. My son had already gone to his mother-in-law's house that Saturday evening before, and I woke up and I ate lunch, and I laid down to count my kicks, and there was no movement at all. I didn't feel anything. I was, I mentioned my husband. I was like, Tyler, he's not really very active today, but I had taken Unisom. So I thought, well, maybe, the Unisom, he was sleeping really well, but I knew that I needed to stay on top of it. So I waited a little while, probably 20 minutes. And then I drank a big giant glass of ice water. And still no movement. And so I actually went and got 2 little Kit Kats. I had gestational diabetes, so we didn't have sweets in the house, but we had given my son his Easter basket the night before. And so I went and got 2 little miniature Kit Kats, knowing that sugar can sometimes make the move. I ate 2 little Kit Kats and waited. There was no movement. And at this point, I'm concerned, very concerned. I'm telling my husband I'm concerned. And by happenstance, the nurse called me because I was scheduled for a C-section to go in the next morning at 5 a.m. for a 7 o'clock C-section on April the 13th, Monday. And she called me and she said, hey, don't eat or drink after midnight, be here at 5 a.m. and gave me the rundown of what I need to do. And I said, I have a question. I said, I am not feeling my baby move. However, I have another good friend of mine, Rebecca, who lives in my neighborhood. She had a baby Doppler that she had gotten from another friend, Jenna, who also had a baby that was born still. And she had let me borrow it. And I said, but he has a heartbeat because I put the Doppler on there and he has a heartbeat. So I know he's good. I was like, but he's not moving. And the nurse was very kind. But she did say with good determination in her voice in a very kind way, like, you need to come in. Like, we want you to come in. When can you be here? And so I was like 30 or 40 minutes, just let me get dressed. It's about a 20-minute drive. And I totally expected to go and them say, oh, Shelley, he's perfect. Go back home. We'll see you at 5 a.m. In fact, my mother-in-law called while we were driving and I told her, I was like, she was like, where are y'all going? I was like, well, because of COVID, we're just taking a ride around town to get out of the house, because I really did not think that. I was like, this is just me being super concerned and maybe everything's going to be perfect. And so I just didn't want to alarm her. And when I got there, they put me on the non-stress test. They put it on my belly, and immediately I could kind of sense that something was just not right. They started saying, like, when you say you haven't felt a move, like, in how long? And I was like, well, I haven't felt a move since last night. And they were like, well, when you have a baby, the heartbeat's supposed to have accelerations at certain points in order to be healthy. They're like, he's not having those accelerations like we would like. He's got a heartbeat and all of that, but he's just not moving. It's just not as active as we'd like for him to be. And so at that point, I didn't know yet if I was going to have him. I just kind of was like, I wasn't super concerned at this point. I mean, I was concerned enough to go in for sure, but I don't think that I realized that he was like in trouble yet. Not being a physician and all, I just wasn't sure. I called my little sister. She is a physician, and kind of told her what's going on. And she was very concerned. And she was like, they need to take that baby tonight. Like, we all have the experience, and the trauma of losing my niece, Brindley. And so she was like, they need to take this serious. And at this point I hadn't even seen the doctor, just the nurses, and they were treating it very serious. And then the doctor walks in and she says, your baby's okay right now, but something is just not right. Like, something's just not, he's not really behaving the way we would like for him to. So, you're not going home tonight. There's no reason for you to go home. We're going to go ahead and take this baby tonight. And then they walked in, they tested my blood sugar because I had gestational diabetes and my blood sugar had gone low. So they came and gave me some apple juice. So at this point I'm thinking, oh, well, I'm low. So he's not moving because my blood sugar must be low, and that's why he's lethargic or something. Maybe his blood sugar has dipped. This is all inside my head. This is my internal dialogue to myself. So they gave me apple juice, and then one of the techs walks in. She's like, hey, don't drink that apple juice. And I was like, oh, I already have. And she was like, oh, we didn't want you to drink it. And I knew at that point that they didn't want me to drink it because they were going to take me back to surgery soon. That was my first indication that maybe something really wasn't right. Then the nurse, she suddenly says, hey, you need to roll over on your side. And another nurse walks in the room and she takes a picture of my screen and says, I'm going to go show Dr. Henserling. And my baby I had a contraction, and he had a late deceleration, and his heartbeat dropped for 4 minutes. And when that happened, the anesthesiologist walked in and he said, hey, so we're having a baby. And I was like, okay. like when, like I wanted to, be able to tell my mom it. He's like right now, like we're going back. And I was concerned because he had told me earlier, the risk of me aspirating with it I had eaten. And I also was on blood thinners and I was nervous about that, just not, just wondering like how that was going to play into everything. And he just said, right now the risks versus benefits is your baby's not doing how we would like him to, and we need to get him out. And so I was taken back for an emergency C-section. And when they took him out, he didn't cry right away. They didn't bring him over to me right away and like let me see him, which gave me the first indication that maybe something wasn't quite right. But I asked my husband, who was there with me, who was just a complete and wonderful rock. The nurses were great. I was singing hymns and things like that because I was nervous, and that one of them sang it with me. It was really, really sweet. And my husband, I was like, is he okay? And he's like, well, yeah, he's okay. They have him over there. And I was like, can my husband see, can he take pictures? And the doctor's like, hey ladies, is it okay if the dad comes over there? And they're like, we're working. And he had meconium. He had gone into distress, and he'd had several bouts of meconium, which is bowel movements inside of my body. And he had the cord around his neck. And so he wasn't doing well. He was in distress. And after, they got him cleaned up and everything, he was green. I mean, his whole skin was stained green. His umbilical cord did not look like that of a normal baby at all. They told me that, his umbilical cord was just stained and just not normal looking from the meconium and being in distress. And they were able to get him to be doing okay. They finally, after they worked on for a little bit, they were like, okay, he's good, and they brought him to me. And I still don't think I realized how much trouble he was in. I mean, they just did such a good job of being so calm. After they were taking down the little blue curtain to separate me, I told the doctor, like, thank you so much. Because I had told her when she came to the room, I said, my sister's baby was born stillborn, and if I want to do whatever I need to do to be an advocate for this baby, like I told her that. And my other sister, I have a lot of sisters, that's why I keep saying sister. My other sister is also a physician, and she had called me and said, you need to take this baby. And so I told the doctor, I was like, thank you so much for being diligent. Thank you for listening to me. And thank you for, saving my baby. And she said, no, you saved your baby. She was like, you saved your baby because you did what you were supposed to and you counted your kicks. And she said, we tell moms all the time, like, pay attention to movement, pay attention to movement. And she was like, and you did it. She was like, you did it. You did what you're supposed to. And she said, if this had been a couple hours later, it would have ended very differently. And so, I guess I want to encourage other mothers that, I could have waited to go in the next day because I was 10 hours away from having him via, 10 to 12 hours away from having him going in the hospital anyway. But they have all reassured me that had I done that, I wouldn't have Thatcher in my arms. I would have been planning a very different life with Thatcher. It wouldn't have been him in my arms. It would have been, him in my heart only. And so I feel like, I'm very thankful of just the people who laid the groundwork before me and who shared their stories and shared their knowledge of counting the kicks. And so after I had him, I wanted Amy to know that Thatcher's life was partially because of Rowan's life. That because of Rowan and because of Drake and because of Brinley, that I knew the importance of paying attention. And I'm just super grateful. And I mean, even though even before Rowan, like I had known babies who'd been stillborn, but I did not know to count my kicks. And my doctor, so the doctor delivered was not my actual OB. The doctor came in to see me the next day and he said, I wanted to come by and see you. And I told him, he said, had you told me there was no movement, I would have said, like, your movement had dwindled, like I would have told you to go in immediately. And so I guess I had false hope that a Doppler, like hearing a heartbeat, meant that he was okay. but I have since learned that that does not mean that they're okay, that it truly is the movement, that they can totally be in stress and their heartbeat's there, but the movement is what matters. Like a change of movement at all, it's better to go get checked out. So that is how we have little Thatcher here, and we're super grateful and super blessed.
Shelley, what an amazing story. And I just want to congratulate you for being willing to speak up because it was a scary time. COVID was a scary time. Can you just tell moms real quickly what it was like to deliver during COVID time so that they know that like what hospitals are doing to keep them and their babies safe, and that it really is important to speak up. And so we don't want that fear to get in the way of that. And so could you just give your viewpoint on how that went once you got to the hospital during COVID times, and if you felt safe in how they handled that?
I want to start by saying that fear is, in my opinion, normal. When this first happened, and I was very adamant, I wanted my doctor to deliver my baby because I knew it was going to be a C-section. And he told me he wasn't sure that he was going to be able to because of the policies they were putting in place. And I have to be honest, I cried in his office. I was like, I don't feel comfortable with that. Like, I want you to deliver him, which I know is crazy because I know a lot of people you never know is going to deliver, but it was just in my mind what made me feel the safest. Anyway, that ended up not happening and didn't come to fruition. That policy was never put in place for where he couldn't have delivered, but because I had an emergency, he didn't deliver. However, my friend Jana Womack, who I've already mentioned, she was a labor and delivery nurse, and before I went in, she said, "Oh, we have that floor completely segmented off." They were working in teams of 4 nurses, so like 4 nurses always worked together, and they didn't work with anybody else. So she had told me she was going to be at my birth on Monday. She was like, if you go into labor on these days, I can't come in because I'm not allowed to work on those days because of the COVID policies. But they had 4 work together, and that way if one of the nurses got sick, they would know that all 4 of those nurses couldn't work. So they kept really good track of it. But those nurses were never cross-contaminated. Like, they never went to other floors. They only worked labor and delivery. They had told me that there was a separate, like if a mother had come in with COVID, that they had a separate OR for those patients than they did for the ones who were healthy. We did have to wear masks. And when I walked into the hospital, they scanned our licenses, and our fevers were checked and symptoms were checked. They were all very kind. It wasn't even really scary. You almost felt like they were like, the front line of an army. Like they were being proactive in protecting you, not reactive and making you think that you're being exposed. So very comfortable. I didn't feel, I was nervous. It was a little disappointing that my mother and my mother-in-law, my dad and my father-in-law and my sisters couldn't be there to meet him. But actually it ended up being a very beautiful experience. Just Tyler and my husband. At our hospital, my husband, I still was allowed to have one support person. And so that I chose my husband. And so it was a very beautiful experience. Like, it was just us learning our baby. And I mean, it wasn't what I had pictured, but it ended up being, the silver lining to the situation. The nurses were amazing. They, like I said, everything was always sanitized. We did not have to wear masks at our hospital inside of our room. We wore them anytime we were out and about. And they did ask us to always cover, like when I left the hospital, they asked for us to cover the baby completely. There were no visitors, but I mean, ultimately, once I was in my little room, I felt like I was like a little hobbit in my little, my little hut. Like, I felt safe from the turmoil and troubles of the world. Like, it wasn't scary at all. And I will be honest with you, I struggle with fear just with knowing, having experiences of people I love lose babies. I was nervous about, what if I get it? What if the baby gets it beforehand? But it ended up being, I felt perfectly safe. I felt like they did a really good job. And my friend Jana had encouraged me, you're probably safer there than anywhere because the protocols are just so strict in terms of keeping you safe and sanitizing everything. I would encourage, if that is what's keeping you from going in and checking on your baby, hours and minutes matter. Once you notice, go in, don't wait. I will be honest with you. Afterwards, I struggled with the fact of, what if the nurse hadn't called me? And I know I would have eventually called, but, wondering if, I'm going in 10 or 12 hours, surely the baby will be okay in 10 or 12 hours. And in my case, that probably would not have been the case. Like, even hours would have made a difference. So just a few hours could have been his life. So if that's what's keeping you from going in, I just encourage you just to know that the doctors are for you, and they're for your baby, and they're going to protect him, and that your job is just to be the advocate and not be afraid. And I even asked, my friend Jana, I didn't even tell her I was going to the hospital, because again, I didn't think anything was wrong. And I didn't want people to think I was being dramatic, because I feel like that as women, we struggle with that. Like, I think that's why some people wouldn't call. Like, I don't want the doctors to think I'm being dramatic or I'm overly worrisome. And I actually asked one of the nurses, I said, I didn't want to be that woman. I almost didn't come in because I didn't want to be that woman that people talked about, like, oh, she's fine. And my friend Jana said, no, we love those women. She was like, we love when they come in. And she's like, even if they've been in 3 times, like, we get excited when we actually get to deliver their baby, because we build that relationship with them by monitoring them when they come in and they're afraid. We get to know them, and we're for them. Like, she's, I think that they are our champions, and they are in our corner. And I think that, they ultimately, their end goal is healthy baby, healthy mama. And so, their hearts are in the right place. Like, they're doing that job because they want to help babies be okay. So I just encourage moms to go in.
Shelley, you are so wise and such a wonderful advocate, and we're just super excited. And I know that one of your first phone calls after Thatcher's arrival was to Amy.
Yes.
I'm going to pitch this question to Amy as we conclude. Amy, what was it like getting that phone call? And can you just talk to us about that day?
Almost no words to describe. Just so happy. Just couldn't believe that, I knew that it worked, but I guess when you actually hear somebody that and you hear it, I just cannot believe that it happened that way. And I'm just so thankful that he's here. I'm so thankful for Shelley. I'm so thankful for baby Thatcher. And I'm so thankful for my son, Rowan, who got this word out there in that way to help save him and know that that sweet boy is here.
Yes.
I think that's awesome. And we are thankful, Amy, for you and now Shelley continuing to be a powerful advocate for the message of Count the Kicks. It is very important to get to know your baby's movement in the 3rd trimester. For high-risk mamas, that's 26 weeks. For the rest, it's 28 weeks. We have a Count the Kicks app. It's free in the iTunes and Google Play Store to download. It's simple, it's informative, it's a great way to bond with your baby and get to know their normal. And then it gives you that data download for mom's intuition so that when baby's movement has changed. And it's so very important to use your voice and your intuition and your baby's movement. That's how they're telling you that it's time to speak up. And we just encourage moms, COVID times or not, to use that app, to work with their providers as soon as they have a concern. And we just are so thrilled to have such wonderful news today to tell you that message has saved Thatcher, and he is going to impact this world in such amazing ways. I thank both Amy and Shelley, and Thatcher was a star. He behaved wonderfully. So I thank you all for doing that. I encourage all of our viewers to encourage their pregnant moms either by telling them or tagging them on social media posts, sharing Count the Kicks, any way, any tool that you can, so that we can see and hear more of these wonderful stories. Ladies, thank you for joining me today. I so appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.